Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Benders, Obscurities, and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. A little while back, I reviewed an audio drama by Wonderland Records about Godzilla.
It just might be one of the most obscure pieces of media to feature the King of the Monsters, but it's hardly unique. Wonderland made lots of spoken word albums spotlighting popular characters from all kinds of genres, and today, I'll be spotlighting another one.
Wonderland may have given Godzilla the microphone in 1977, but in 1963, Dracula and Frankenstein entered the studio, and Wonderland let these famous monsters speak.
Famous monsters? You mean like the magazine?
Actually, that's 100% correct, Snazzy. Perhaps a little background is needed before we go any further.
Famous Monsters Speak was indeed produced in association with the magazine Famous Monsters of Filmland. This magazine, conceived by the original super nerd Forrest J. Ackerman, was and still is a popular magazine for sci-fi and horror fans the world over, and the company is no stranger to producing original content every once in a while. Ergo, that's the reason this album is called Famous Monsters Speak. It was sort of an inside joke.
Despite what you see on the cover, though, this album has no connection to Universal that I've found.
The album covers always feature images of Dracula and Frankenstein, which evoke the Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi versions. Some variations also feature the Mummy, the Wolfman, the Gill Man, and the Invisible Man, though none of them appear on the album proper, nor did they ever get their own follow-ups.
How they got away with using those images in advertising, I have no idea. Like I said in the Godzilla review, information on Wonderland Records is sparse these days. Maybe they worked out a deal with Universal, but I honestly haven't a clue.
Alright, so now that we've established what it isn't, can you finally tell us what it is?
Of course. Famous Monsters Speak is the audio equivalent of found footage. You might call it found record.
Ads for the album were often styled as newspaper articles, touting that these recordings of the respective monsters' voices had been recovered from Castle Frankenstein and a coffin in a London museum. In a way, this is quite appropriate for both of the monsters in question, since their original stories were written as though they were real events documented by or conveyed to the authors.
And if you can believe it, both Dracula and Frankenstein were voiced by the same person.
The voice talent here is the late Gabriel Dell, a prolific actor who is perhaps best known as one of the Bowery Boys. If you didn't know that though, you might never have guessed any of it, as Dell has an impressive talent for voices.
What did he make me from? From what grave did I come?
You have come to see if there is such a thing as Dracula.
Okay, now let's get into the details. The album opens with Frankenstein, which is the name of the track, but don't worry, it does make a distinction between the doctor and the monster.
The setup here is that, as part of his experiments, Victor Frankenstein set up devices to record the monster's voice. As such, the monster takes plenty of opportunities to vent about things like his existence, his hatred for his creator, and the motivations behind his actions.
This track is styled as a news radio broadcast, with the monster's recordings occasionally interrupted by a reporter filling us in on the crowd reactions.
That ends the first of what I can only call the tape recordings of the monster's voice.
Hey, he's not a real radio announcer. His voice doesn't have nearly enough inflection.
There's just no pleasing some people.
While this may seem like an unnecessary framing device, it actually does build to something at the end, but I won't spoil that for you here. The real meat of it all is what the monster has to say, and believe me, he has not spoken this much since Mary Shelley's original novel.
In fact, the novel seems to be the primary source of inspiration for this play, as it presents us with a fairly articulate monster who is lashing out against Victor for his mistreatment. He is perhaps a bit more sinister than other portrayals, but given the context, that's appropriate for the story.
Dell's voice acting here really does convey a sense of weariness and seething anger that's befitting of the monster.
I know your name. I hate your name. I have time. All the time I need to put an end to you.
If I'm being honest though, the one thing that brings this track down is that it doesn't really give us anything new.
It's not bad by any stretch, but it's a fairly typical depiction of the Frankenstein story, told in a different format with a different framing device. What carries it is the acting and the atmosphere, the latter of which was generated by Foley artist Hal Johnson. This is what elevates the listening experience above the generic.
The second track is devoted to Dracula, and as such, this is where things get much darker.
For our setup, there's been a string of mysterious deaths in London, and one investigator has followed some obscure clues to a museum basement. There he finds Count Dracula waiting for him, and the vampire, likely for his own amusement, allows the poor mortal to tag along on one of his nightly excursions. The investigator finds himself powerless as Dracula proudly demonstrates how he gets away with murder, and drags him deeper and deeper into the extensive supernatural underworld beneath London's pristine exterior.
It's definitely the more original story of the two, as it seems writer Cherny Berg took the opportunity to explore the character in greater depth.
Here, Dracula is basically taking the opportunity to show off. He demonstrates his power to someone who is incapable of stopping him, all with the purpose of making the investigator his next victim. It's kind of like the dark precursor to What We Do in Shadows.
Gabriel Dell takes the script and runs with it, adopting an eerie charisma that's befitting of Dracula.
Although the Prince of Darkness is undeniably creepy and vile, the pride and charisma he puts forth is alluring in a way. You almost can't help but root for him, even though you know you shouldn't because he's evil incarnate.
In short, it delivers everything you could possibly want from a story featuring one of the greatest villains of all time.
I hear the police are looking for a prowler. For fingerprints, they search. For marks on windows. Little marks on the necks of my victims. They do not believe.
Yet Berg's script goes a step further. We don't just meet Dracula. We enter his domain.
The Dracula play presents us with a world, or rather an underworld, over which Dracula reigns as king. This is a realm of vampires, hellhounds, and eternal darkness, a place where mortal men are not welcome. Even scarier, we know that the only thing keeping these dangers at bay is the will of Dracula himself, and he can change his mind about releasing them for any reason, or for no reason at all.
If you allow yourself to really be immersed while listening, it just might make your skin crawl.
You know, this all sounds kinda dark. Didn't Wonderland Record make these things for kids?
Technically, yes. Kids do love the Universal monsters.
Well, no argument there, but it still seems a lot darker than the Godzilla album.
Well, what do you expect given the subject matter?
The Godzilla album was definitely geared towards children, though adults can certainly enjoy its campiness if they're willing to. But Godzilla is science fiction, which has the liberty to be upbeat and fun if it wants to.
Famous Monsters Speak, however, is horror, and horror is an inherently dark genre.
I wouldn't say this album is so heavy on darkness that kids can't listen to it, but I guess that would depend on how skittish they are. At the same time, I don't want to give the impression that this album is trite kiddie stuff either. The fact is that it wasn't really made for kids or adults, but for fans of horror, regardless of age, hence why it bears the Famous Monsters name.
That's the bottom line, I think.
If you enjoy that old school brand of monster movies that were light on guts but heavy on atmosphere, Famous Monsters Speak should appeal to you. It's like one of those movies in audio form, and it was made with a lot of care and attention to detail so as to do the genre justice.
The result is something that, much like the monsters it showcases, will last through the ages as long as people are able to listen to it. Not bad for an album generated by only 3 people. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Give me a sharp stick and some Italian food, and I could easily take on Dracula by myself with one hand behind my back.
I would change the channel, but the knobs are broken.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, as well as subscribe to the channel for more content of a similar nature. Also, check the description for links to our Twitter, DeviantArt, and Patreon pages, as well as the Amazon link for the novel Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, penned by yours truly. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.